Okay. Good evening. My name is Don Ficken. I'm an astronomer from St. Louis with the Astronomical League, and I want to welcome you to tonight's program on how to modify a library telescope. We've been doing this monthly series for a while, and if you mark your calendar right now, next month on December 16th, we'll talk about free tools to navigate the night sky. It'll be the third Wednesday of the month, about the same start time. So we have, many of you may be considering a library telescope for your library, either as an amateur astronomer or a library, and the idea of modifying the telescope can be a little bit of intimidating. So we've got two speakers tonight. The first is Tom Lynch with the Amateur Observer Society of New York, that will talk about his process. He supports about 12, 13 libraries, and he builds them one at a time for each library, directly supports them. He'll go through his process, and then we'll have Ron Thompson, who works with the Southern Maine Astronomers, and he's built some 200 telescopes. Each one has their own techniques. You'll find that there's no perfect way to do a library telescope, but it's only perfect to the extent that it works for you specifically. So we'll go through some of their different techniques, how they go about it. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Tom Lynch, and he's going to talk about the modifying the library telescope program from his point of view.
Thanks, Don. Hello, everybody. I am, as Don said, Tom Lynch from the Amateur Observer Society. And I really do enjoy doing these library telescopes and working with the libraries. And I do it in an easier way than others do. I mean, I want to call it laziness, that's okay, I guess, but I do it on my own. There are some things that people from my club help with, star parties and maybe some of the presentations to the patrons to teach them how to use the telescope. But the modifying the telescope I do on my own. So I've come up with information from all kinds of sources and found the way that was easiest for me. And I think it works. It's probably not as good as doing it in more depth than some other places do and other clubs do, but I think it's a valuable way to do it. Okay, so I'm going to go through my presentation very quickly because we're going to hopefully have a lot of questions at the end, and my goal is 10 minutes. So hopefully I can make that. Okay, so the library telescope program, if you don't know, is basically a library takes the telescope, buys the telescope, gets modified, and then they let people borrow it just like a book. It's a great idea. Now, it started in New Hampshire in 2008. The New Hampshire Astronomical Society came up with it, and it was based on modifications proposed by Mark Stobridge, who we affectionately call the father of the library telescope. So to my knowledge, there's over 500 libraries in 44 states across the US. There's probably a lot more of them that we're not aware of, and we really would like to be aware of all of them. So if you're aware of a library telescope program and it's not on our website, and there's a link right there to get you to it, please add it. Anybody can add it. The library can add it, the person helping the library or the club, or even just anybody who knows that it exists. I mean, that's all we're looking for. Okay, next slide, Don, please. Okay, so this can be done as an astronomy club project, having a lot of people involved in various skills, which is nice to be able to do that. Or it can be done as a single amateur astronomer, such as myself. Certainly easier to do a lot of them with a lot of people. I definitely have a limit as to how many I'm going to be able to do, but it's worked out pretty well so far. But I haven't done the hundreds of telescopes that Don and Ron have done. Next slide, please. Okay, so on the right is what the telescope looks like right out of the box, and after you put it all together. And the changes that are made to it are done to make it easier to handle. An inexperienced person would be using it, so we try to make it very simple, try to make it very difficult to lose things. Things are attached in various ways and covered and such. So the whole idea here is to simplify things and make it good for somebody who really isn't experienced with a telescope. Next slide, please. Okay, this is sort of a summary of the modifications that I deal with. Real quick, just to give you the landscape of it. Number one is we attach the lens cap and the cover by string, wire, or rope, whatever manner we can, so that it doesn't get lost. It's very easy to lose these things at night when it's dark. The number 2 here is the low-tech moon filter. And I'll get into that a little bit more after this, but it's a way to keep the moon from being too bright for your eyes. Number 3, we affixed the viewfinder. It's a red dot viewfinder, and some people do modifications to get rid of the lithium battery that comes with it and use AA batteries, which is certainly easier to deal with. Numbers 4 and 5 are the zoom eyepiece, and so we permanently attach it either through glue or non-standard screws, so a screw that somebody could not easily undo, and we put it on there. The focuser has the eyepiece has an eye guard at the top, and it's rubber that's sort of attached to the metal, and that comes off easily, so we found a way to make that less likely to come off. We add various decals. You can see V1, do not look at the sun there. And then they protect the collimation screws. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. Next slide, please. Okay, the lens cap and the tube cover. So the tube cover has holes punched into it and or drilled into it with string or whatever method to affix it. It's really pretty straightforward. Can't lose it, which is good, right? Because it would certainly be likely to be lost. Okay, next, please. Okay, the moon filter. So if you look at the moon, the full moon through a telescope, it's very bright. So it affects the one eye, and the other eye that's not looking through it is not affected. So when you walk away from it, the eyes are kind of out of sync. That only takes 30 seconds to a minute, perhaps, to adjust. But it is unsettling to some people. So what an amateur astronomer normally does with their telescope is you put a moon filter on the bottom of the eyepiece. Unfortunately, we can't do that here because the zoom eyepiece is attached, and we don't want people to disconnect it. So this is sort of a low-tech answer to that. Minimize the amount of light going into the telescope, and that reduces the brightness of the full moon. Not a perfect answer, but because it does diminish the image a little bit. You're getting less light that you're focusing through the telescope, but it works, and you don't really need to do this. But if that difference in their eyes bothers you, then it's a good thing to do. Other point is that the full moon is not really the best time to look at the moon. You should look at it when it's going through. It's either waxing or waning. You'll see shadows, and you get a better sense of depth. A lot of the moon's features are kind of bled out in the full moon. So it's really not the best time to do that. Next, please. Okay, the viewfinder. So the viewfinder is a red dot. And if you look at the lower left here, that red dot there is what is you look through it, you see that red dot, and if everything's lined up right, what that dot is on is what you'll see when you look through the telescope. The viewfinder has a bigger field of view, and you can use that to easily find. If you didn't have a viewfinder, even looking at the moon is difficult to get a telescope onto it. So you really need this. It's important. This one is very good. It's a bit of a pain in the neck with the battery. The battery is on the bottom of the. If you look at the top on the top photo on the right, right there, that's where the battery is contained. So you have to kind of pry that off with your fingernails or maybe a screwdriver or something. And then on the right here, we've got what the lithium battery looks like, and it's held in there. It's a bit of a pain in the neck. People sometimes bend that clip too far, and it doesn't hold back. The lithium batteries used to be a lot harder to get. They're not so much now. And what some people do, next slide, please, Don. They add this AA batteries. And this is a bit of a process to get that done. The batteries are in the upper left here. The batteries are in that little case there. Wires are attached to it, and it goes into where the lithium battery was. And there's a little construction here of the wires and setting it up so that it still works. And there's a little bit of soldering involved. It's a bit of work, and I've never done this. I decided that I didn't like the wires being exposed like that. I thought they might get caught on something or somebody would yank on them, but this definitely works, and it's an option. Next, Don. Okay, the viewfinder. I got a telescope recently that that is a brand new one, and it has a different viewfinder where the lithium battery is on the top of the viewfinder rather than underneath. It kind of surprised me, and this one looks. If you look at on the right hand side, the top, you've got a compartment there that you pry open. You can do it with your finger, and then the one below that, it's showing the lithium battery and it's showing the cover. So this is definitely a very big improvement. I wish they would have an automatic turn-off switch. Maybe you push a button and it works for a minute and then it goes off and you got to push the button, because these batteries tend to, it gets turned on and doesn't get turned off, and it tends to drain the battery, having to replace them. Okay, next, please. Okay, here's the zoom eyepiece, and on the left-hand side, lower one, you'll see there's a black tape on the edge of the where you look into the eyepiece, and that holds the rubber guard there that you put your eye up against. Works very well. We used to lose these periodically, and Celestron was great. They would send it to you for free sometimes. I think they got a little tired of that, which is understandable, and so I think this is a really good answer. On the left side, it shows how you affix the eyepiece into the focuser, and I'm going to let Ron talk about that in a minute. Next, please. Okay, these are the decals. The decals are very, there's 4 of them here, and they're very good. People always have questions, and it's good to have this kind of information there. People love to know how, what kind of magnification they're looking at. So this tells you, where you set the zoom eyepiece, and then it tells you how big the magnification is. So this is the upper left. On the upper right is a QR code. You can take your phone and point it at this, and it'll bring you to the librarytelescope.org website, and there's an abundance of information there. There's videos on how to use it, and it's really good for the person who is uncomfortable, not sure what they need to do, and gives you a lot of good information. On the lower half, we have the moon on the left side. This is this decal was provided by Rocky Togney from the Central Arkansas Astronomical Society, and I like this a lot. This one gives you some real information that you put there. Often the library will provide like a moon map maybe, or a planisphere and things like that. And so maybe it's repetitive, but if you don't have that, this gives you an idea of what you're looking at. And then on the right side on the bottom, the most important thing is do not look at the sun with this telescope. There is no solar filter. You don't want to look at it. I've even recommended libraries take the library back, the telescope back during the eclipse, because worried that somebody might think they could look at it through the telescope. So okay, let's move on to the next one, Don. Okay, the collimation. So collimation is a process where you take you adjust the mirror, the primary mirror, and align everything so that the optics work, maximum. And this telescope doesn't really need a lot of adjusting. It's being small. My telescope is a bit bigger, and every time I move it, I have to collimate it. And collimating is not that hard once you get used to it. So these screws at the bottom of the telescope, in that center picture and on the top there, it shows you what the screws normally look like. So you can cover it, which is what I did in my first telescope that I did the modifications to. You put as you can see below that in the middle, lower, right? That covers it up, and you screw that in, and you have, again, non-standard screws, and it covers that up, and that really works. It's a little, looks a little odd maybe, but there's nothing wrong with that. As I said, I did that the first time. Unfortunately, when I did it, I was drilling the holes into the tube. I thought I was about an inch away from the mirror. Turned out I was about 1/8 of an inch away from it. That really scared me. I thought, okay, I almost blew this. The first time I'm doing it, so I haven't done that. What I've been doing is over on the left here, I put a label on it. It says, please do not touch these screws. And I also ask the librarians to make sure these, these 6 screws are hand tight when it comes in and when it goes out. Okay, the really good way to do this, making it foolproof, is to is to replace the screws with non-standard screws. So get rid of these 6 screws that you see in here and replace them. This is definitely the better way to do it. It's a bit more work, and as I really haven't had trouble with the 13, almost 14 now telescopes that I've done with the little sticker there saying don't touch them. So it seems to be working out pretty well. Okay, next, Don. Okay, this just real quickly to give you an idea of how it's transported and how you walk around with it. You'll see it, I call it the football hold on the right. You put it sort of in the crux of your elbow and you pull it towards you, and then you've got a hand free. A lot of people will try to use it with 2 hands. Well, that's not easy when you're then going through a doorway, getting into a car or whatever. But so that's kind of the recommended way to do it. On the left, we have how you put it into a car. You don't want to leave it freestanding in the car because it'll fall over. Here, it's very good. The lap belt goes across into the bottom of the telescope frame, and then the lap belt goes across the barrel. Now, this isn't going to save you if you're in an accident, probably, but you just with regular driving, this is really a good way to handle it. Okay, next. Okay, this is a flyer that was put together by John Goss, who is the former president of the Astronomical League. And it talks about the library telescope program, and it's intended to be given to a library. So if you want to do a library telescope program, you put your information down there, the contact info at the bottom, and provide it to the library and see if they've got any interest. It's pretty informative. It doesn't talk about cost, but that's something that they certainly would consider as important and ongoing costs. They always want to know those kind of things. So this is sort of a handy flyer that we hope people will use to promote the programs with libraries. Because really the important part here is explaining to the library how it works and how good it is. And every library that I've dealt with, once they bought into the concept, they were thrilled. So it's really a good way to do this. Don, if go to the next slide, I think we're up to Ron. Okay, I'm going to hand this over to Ron now. Thank you very much, and I hope you have lots of questions at the end. Thank you. Yep. Okay, Ron, all yours.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Don. Hello, everyone. I'm Ron Thompson. I'm with Southern Maine Astronomers up here in the North Country, up in the state of Maine. And I've been volunteering with Cornerstones of Science since 2012, when Mark Stobridge came up and introduced the program to us. And we've been modifying telescopes and sending them out ever since. Cornerstones has been very, very active with the STEM program in local libraries here in Maine. And we have quite a few libraries in the state of Maine that do have the telescopes. Some have 2, along with waiting lists. Even with 2 telescopes, there are waiting lists. So it's very popular up here as well. We also go to the libraries. I go with the executive director, and Sarah and I present the telescope. I do a basic astronomy presentation and then do a hands-on with the telescope with the library staff. And Sarah then goes over the checkout, check-in procedures and what to look for when the telescope, before the telescope goes out and when the telescope comes back. Okay, so preparing the telescope. Remove the telescope, obviously, from the box with the bag. This is what it looks like sitting on the bottom piece of foam. And we keep the bag because we do ship the telescopes out. Normally, when they get to a library, they discard the box and bag, and they are handled just as the way that Tom just showed in that picture, carrying it in the vehicle, carrying it personally in your arm. So once you get the telescope, you can throw the box of packing away. One of the bad things about not keeping the bag, if you store it on that foam, it's going to get on the base and it's going to be an awful mess to clean off. It's very difficult. Okay, and there's a round piece of cardboard that's between the base and the opening of the telescope, the way it's packed. Save that. It's used to, yeah, there you go. Thank you. That piece of cardboard is very handy later on. Next slide, please. So take it out of the box, out of the bag, lay it down, check the feet. Now, when we first started the program, the feet were not glued in. The feet are glued in now. You lose a foot and you're in trouble. So always check the feet, make sure they're glued in. Haven't found any in the last few years since Orion's been sending them with the glued feet. So that's a good thing. But I check them anyway, just out of habit. The base, if it swivels smoothly, it's fine. If it swivels and it grinds, that means that you need to reseat the lifted staples that are rubbing between the bases on the pads. So you need to take the base apart, get a flathead screwdriver, a fairly wide one, and just pound the things down and get them so that they're seated beyond the, yeah, the little piece that keeps it from scratching. Anyway, next slide, please. All right, open the clamshell, take the tube out, take the paper off, and then flip the tube into the other direction so that the opening of the tube is where the handhold is. You can't see where the handhold is right there, but they do come now from the factory in this position as well. So just in case, we want the opening of the tube facing the handhold. Take a screwdriver and loosen those two screws that you see underneath the yellow ball on the base there. The accessory bar is mounted there. Remove the accessory bar, tighten the screws. And that's all there is to that. Next slide, please. All right, here's a little bit different from what Tom was doing. We, right from the get-go, started dismantling by taking 3 screws that hold the mirror cell in and carefully remove it, like shown in the picture. Next slide. There's a lot of words here, but what it is nothing more than explaining how to go ahead and replace the hardware with the old, yeah, with the new washers and lock nuts. If you would go to the next slide, please, I'll show the pictures for this and explain it. Okay, when you take the mirror assembly out of the tube, you unscrew all of the hardware, and you can see them all laying there in that picture number 1, laying next to the screwdriver. You can throw those away or sell them for scrap, I guess. What's left is you've got a cover and you've got the base with the mirror and the 3 screws sticking up with the springs. Takes the springs off. After you take the springs off, you're going to take a long nose plier, needle nose plier, if you call it that, and you're going to go as far to the base, as close to the base as you can, and turn those screws counterclockwise to make sure they're snug. You want to make sure they're snug. Don't over tighten them, just make sure they're good and snug. And number 2, then you're going to take that cap and you're going to drill out the 3 small holes with a 15/64 bit. And that'll allow the smaller holes to be used with less play in them when you reseat it on the mirror. Picture 3 shows the 3 lock washers and the 3 new lock nuts. Those are lock nuts. What I do usually is just finger tighten them and then take the socket and turn the socket about 5 turns so that the screws are just about even with the top of the lock nut. And then when you squeeze those 2 pieces together on the springs, there should be enough movement so that they're not bottoming out, and it's easy to tell. When that's done, then you go ahead as it is and reinstall the cell as shown in figure 4. Next, please. The next piece that's really important, and Tom mentioned it as well, you unscrew the eye cup, you can see that top section, that's where the eye cup is. What we do is we take some Loctite 425 and put a little bit on the threads to make sure that when we screw it back on and this sets, that people can't unscrew this. We've had some issues where that's been unscrewed and some nasty stuff has been dumped inside. You know, the next piece you want to unscrew is the barrel on the bottom. Put a little dab of 425 on those threads and screw the barrel back on and set it aside. Now, Tom showed you where they put a piece of tape around the top part to hold the rubber eye cup on. I've been using, I don't know, it's been quite a few years now, because in the first 2 or 3 years, we've lost a couple of the eye cups. So what I've done is I've used contact gel, and Loctite makes a good contact gel. And I'll put 5 small drops between I just lift the edge of the eye cup up with my thumb, make an opening so that I can put a little drop, 5 little drops around the eye cup. And we haven't had any issues since using the contact gel. It's been really great. And put it aside for later on. And next slide, please. And later on is when you mount it in the focuser. But before you do that, you remove the ring from the focuser with the 2 knurled knobs on it that actually adhere the eyepiece. What you're going to do first, though, is remove the ring, put a 425 spot of glue around those threads, not around the threads, just a little section of it, and then screw that back onto the focuser. Once that's screwed back onto the focuser and you get it down nice and tight, that 425 is designed to meld metal to plastic. It's specially for metal to plastic. So the 425 will keep that locked on. And if anybody wants to unscrew that eyepiece, they really got to do a number. The other thing is we take the knurled thumb screws out and replace them with hex head screws. Now there's going to be a parts list at the end of the slide presentation that shows what you can order from where and the size of the hex head screws. And then they're tightened up, but not over tightened with a hex wrench. And next slide, please. So once it's in there, once it's mounted, the screws are snug, then you rotate the barrel of the eyepiece to make sure that it does rotate from 8 to 24 or 7 to 21, whichever style that you have. Most of the eyepieces coming through now are from Celestron. So you want to go from stop to stop. And that's what it looks like. Next slide, please. Easy Finder, Tom has already spoken about that. We usually put a green dot on the on-off switch so people will know what to touch and what not to touch. The azimuth and elevation. What I like to do with those controls is center the azimuth as well as the elevation. And once they're centered, you can see that just by looking at it, you'll see the spacing from the top down from the azimuth adjustment. And then looking on the side, you can see that that's level across with the mounting of the Easy Finder itself. Okay, next slide, please. Then we take and we apply the double-sided tape to the feet, or the rails, if you will, on the bottom of the Easy Finder. And the next slide, please. This is how to go ahead and mount that. I'm not gonna read through it. I'm just gonna say what you do is center a distant object in the tube with the eyepiece. Once you get that centered, then you wanna lock it in place as steadily as you can and remove the red paper from the double-sided tape and gently align it with the object in the distance and just drop it gently over the screws down onto the tube. Once you've got that pretty much locked down just with the tape, look again in the eyepiece to make sure it's still centered, and then put the screws, the thumb screws, onto the Easy Finder. And as you're locking it down with those screws, keep your other hand on it to keep it from moving side to side as you're tightening it. Once it's tightened, check to make sure that it's fairly close to where you wanted it set. By doing this, when it comes time to adjust it, if you're vertically centered on the object, you don't have to do very much adjustment on the azimuth. It's not a big deal adjusting the elevation. You can just bring that little red dot right up or down to where that centered object is. And that should be really good. And as Tom says, once you put that red dot on an object like Saturn or whatever, and you look in the eyepiece, it should be there or very close to there. And then you can zoom in and look at it a little closer depending on seeing conditions. Okay, next slide, please. Here's the camera bag or the fanny pack, whatever you want to call it, that we have on the base of, on the back side of the telescope. And it includes the National Audubon Society's Constellations booklet, which is great. All the constellations are listed. They're in alphabetical order, very easy to find. And we have actually developed an instruction manual at for about the same size as the National Audubon book that fits in the pouch. And everything in that little book, soup to nuts, anything you need to know about the telescope, making adjustments, using it during the daytime before you take it out at night, getting used to the controls. We have the sky chart in there for skymaps.org, and you can call one up each month. We usually have the librarians hand them a sky map of the month with the telescope when they check it out. And there's all kinds of good stuff in that little book. And we have the brush, which is for the library. It does not go out with the bag, with the telescope rather. It stays at the library. So if anything needs cleaning, we've shown them how to use the brush and get the big pieces off. And if there's some nose grease, which sometimes there is nose grease or fingerprints, use the other side and just gently, don't try to scratch it. That's why you brush the big stuff off first, but gently get that grease off. You want to do that as soon as you can, otherwise it will burn into, if you will, and then it never come off the eyepiece. Next slide, please. Oh, the headset on that, I forgot to say, that's a dual headset, white light and red light. Obviously, the red light is for when you're working outside and you want to read something or make some adjustments or even walk around, you put the red light. And when you're ready to pick up, you've got the white light. And that takes care of that presentation. You're unmute, Don.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Ron and Tom. So we are running just a little bit late, mainly because we got started just a little bit late. So we do have, I'm going to set a little time aside for some questions. I will say right here before we get into the questions, we have set up a tips page on librarytelescope.org/tips, TIPS. And we have a number of things out there. We have a PDF already out there, today's presentation. What Ron Thompson just gave, his presentation, we actually have a presentation with some of his notes in there, which will give you some of the finer details. And it'll probably take us a day or so, but we'll get a YouTube recording of today's presentation. And then you can see there's a lot of other stuff out there that I think you'll find pretty helpful about flyers that you saw, that nice little flyer that John Goss put together. So some really good materials out there. Once again, librarytelescope.org tips. And also, by the way, it's got some links to our Facebook page and other places. So with that, I'm going to open up some questions, and I'm already getting a few questions from Facebook. Oh, he's asking us when we're going to do another build in St. Louis. Well, I don't know. By the way, I'm pulling up the page right here because this is the bolt department, I think, where you're saying Ron Thompson that you had some bolts here. So why don't you go ahead and address that just real briefly.
Sure.
And, yeah.
Okay. If you're going to do this, do it the more difficult way, I guess Tom would say. And there's nothing wrong with whatever way you can do it is good, and as long as you're comfortable with it. And so what we do is we order from the Bolt Depot, and there are only three items that you have to order. You have to order the washers, and the information's right there, and that'll be published, obviously. The lock nuts, which go over the screws so that they're nice and snug. When you're collimating it, it's really easy. And I've even dropped a scope on the floor, broken a foot, and I thought, oh my God, here we go. When I've recollimated it, checked it anyway, it was still spot on. So believe me, those lock nuts and those lock nuts really work well. And little fingers don't get to turn those shiny knobs in the back anymore. So that's where you can order them, and they're not expensive.
Okay, so I never actually answered the question from the person from Carbondale. Actually, we'll probably take a look at the first of the year. What we don't know right now is what kind of role COVID will play in our ability to get together. Obviously, we have to get together typically if we do a lot of telescopes, but I know that we had at least one telescope, one library that was interested in maybe 3 up to 5. So it may be that frankly, one person does this and we do it in shifts, but our typical modification period would be would be probably the end of February. We take orders about February 1st, I believe it is. We have another question from this is on Zoom. It looks like there are some moderate expenses incurred when making these modifications. Who finances these expenses? Maybe Tom, let's start with you because you're actually doing some libraries that you're working directly with some libraries on yours, right?
Yeah, so I generally do it myself. I mean, I cover that. The library is very happy to cover it. I mean, all things considered, they're getting a pretty decent telescope, and all with the modifications and everything, something that they're going to be using. But maybe it's $5 to $10 the way I do it. It's probably a little bit more the way Ron does it, the more involved. But I've been basically just paying that myself. I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4 a year, something like that. If I was doing 40 or 50 of them, I wouldn't feel so generous, I suppose. But the libraries are very receptive to it. I tell libraries that the whole thing will run about, I used to say $350, probably under that. But now I'm telling them $400. And because they usually buy books and stuff and maps and planisphere and things like that. So it's a bargain for most libraries. So it really isn't a problem. And I buy these things in quantity and the pieces that I need, and I just do them.
Ron, do you have any comments on that?
Yep. What Cornerstones does is they'll order in bulk to save shipping expenses, obviously. And then what we'll do is we'll modify them completely. We'll have what you saw, excuse me, with the eyepiece. The eyepiece is ordered separately from Orion. Everything else comes in the box. The finder scope, easy finder comes in the box, and we order the constellation book. We have the instruction book, and I don't know what that is as far as cost goes. We ordered the brushes from Orion separately, and we ordered the eyepieces from Orion. I guess I said that. And what else? Oh, we ordered the white and red headlamps separately, and the fanny packs. So there's a bunch of stuff that we do order. We put it all together as a package, and we used, I can't remember what the cost was to the library, but it wasn't that much. We didn't make anything off of it. Matter of fact, they were talking about kicking the price up because the cost of the Constellations book went up. But you can see the hardware is inexpensive. There's 100 pieces in each of those bags, so you can do 30 telescopes basically. and I've gone through bags of those.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else would I want to mention? The only thing that the library has to pay for, regardless of where they are in the country, and we ship, last I knew, 22 states are dealing with Cornerstones. If you have any information that you want to get, you can Google cornerstones.org, and you probably be able to get all kinds of information off their website. I can find out some more information on that. I wasn't prepared kind of to do this, but that's okay.
Yeah, I think we also have another question here about, do the libraries buy the telescope from you or the club? And I'll tell you a little bit about what we do in St. Louis. We have almost 200 telescopes, working with something 30 odd libraries. And the way we do it, you have to understand that there is a basic telescope, which everybody understands, but there's a lot of modifications. We put eyepieces on it, stickers, and a lot of things. So we typically will buy everything and then just charge the library pretty much. We're trying to keep this at our cost. And so the library's not buying the things separately. They're buying like a package from us, all ready to go kind of. And that's a pretty typical approach. I've worked with about 5 different cities to launch programs, and that seems to be a fairly typical approach. Of course, the price will vary based on what the eyepiece zoom, with the zoom, they've been going up a lot in price, and it just depends. So one of the things that we got into St. Louis was concern, actually by other cities, like, wow, can the libraries really afford this? And you'd be surprised, libraries can sell books and do fundraisers. And the truth is, surprisingly, libraries have not had a big issue with the price of the telescope. It's been very popular. They're very happy when they get it. So.
Yeah, and to follow up a little bit on that too, folks, you can go to your library and say, hey, let's have a contest, name that telescope. Mm-hmm. So when the telescope comes in all ready to go, you can have a contest to name it, and whoever wins the contest gets to use it the first time. That's something that we've done up here too. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, we've actually had a lot of situations where people will donate a telescope, and the library put their name on the telescope. Okay, so we have another question from is Facebook. It says, does this program also work for school libraries? Sorry if this is a basic question. You guys have experience with that?
No schools. This is strictly state libraries.
Yeah, so we've actually in our St. Louis program, it's a pretty large program. I don't know that they've actually put it in school libraries, but I think it would be really good from a school library point of view. What we did do is we actually looked at it a little differently than just placing it directly into a school library, thinking that if it was in a public library, an educator from many schools could come and check out the same telescope, as opposed to having one telescope that's occasionally used at the school, and then, you know, it's not used the rest of the year. So we tried to do more of a centralized approach. I think that could really work, but it really takes working in the community. But most of the schools in the St. Louis area, at least a lot of the schools, have their own telescopes. And sometimes they're very large telescopes. But this library telescope is really good for that kind of thing. It's very perfect for kids to take them home and have them. But the concept of putting them in the library means even more people get to use it, and that's the idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing is too, we require an adult to check it out of the library. Have to be a member in good standing. The adult checks it out and carries it in the car. Once the library gets the telescope, once we ship it, we tell them to destroy the box, destroy the foam. You know, it's carried outside of anything. We don't want to cover it up. And it's transported just the way Tom showed it in his picture, and carried just the way Tom did.
Yeah, if you actually go to our librarytelescope.org, and there's probably other websites, there's some good example checkout procedures that you can have, because it's a little unusual type of a thing to check out. And there's actually sample procedures that some of our libraries that we got from actually, I think, New Hampshire, when they started there, they sent us procedures. Our libraries locally made some changes, and they worked pretty well. All right, so is in our area, I've got some comments in our areas, organizations financing, such as the Rotary. Rotaries are very common place to source these kind of things. In fact, I know one of some of our team members have those type of things. And it looks like we're pretty much getting caught up with the questions that I can see. Any final comments from you guys from as far as your perspective before we close off here?
You know, I just wanted to say that question about does the library buy the telescope? So you guys do it in quantity, a little different from the way I do it. I have the library actually buy the telescope and buy the zoom eyepiece. And then I go to the library and do the modifications. sometimes I have to, well, I do have to bring the cover back and cut a hole in it to do the moon filter, but it's a little different. So they're buying everything. I never see a penny out of it, even, you know, reimbursement in any way. So they get that done, and I kind of like that because they buy it, it's theirs, they see it, they feel it. I don't know. It's the same idea, I guess. Ultimately, when I do them just, you know, one or two at a time, it kind of makes more sense that way. Well,
Yeah,
you
I
guys do in quantity, obviously, you have to do it the way you do it.
Yeah, we did one time, we did 50 telescopes at once. So I think the thing that I would like to leave right before we sign off is, first off, thanks to both of you for doing a great job. And sorry about the little delay in getting started. But I think also there's a thing here about there's no real one good way to do it, like the perfect way. There has to be some flexibility based on your market. Sometimes you do it one way because you're more comfortable with that. And as long as it works, that's really fine. We definitely see variances. There's even opinions about what size telescopes. But what I can tell you is that working with multiple cities and in the Metro St. Louis area, this telescope, this 4.5-inch Star Blast, is really a very good telescope, very portable, and it's been holding up pretty well as far as our libraries, and they're very, very happy with it. I think it's just a great program. So I'm going to sign off. We're going to sign off here. Thank you to everybody for joining us tonight. We will get a YouTube video. It might take us a day or two to get this done. I'm not sure if I got the recording to start right on this, so we may have to do a little bit of work on that. But all the PDFs are out there, and we look forward to seeing you next month on December 16th. Free tools to navigate the night sky. I think we're going to have some fun with that. There's some really fun tools out there. So once again, signing off. Thanks a lot, everybody, and have a great evening.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Good night.